Hello, we're here today with Robbie, Executive Vice President of Hawaiian Electric. Robbie, how you doing?
Great to be here.
Good.
Good.
We're going to go over a few issues that Hawaiian Electric is dealing with. It's going to be going through a major transformation in the next, decade or so. We're going to find out a little bit about it. If you fly over Honolulu, if you fly over the islands, you'll see photovoltaics on rooftops. Practically every week there's a story or two about new types of renewable energy and progress with wind, biomass, biofuel, ocean.
You name it, we've got all of it here. We're very lucky. Hawaii's blessed.
Yeah, there's a great potential.
Huge.
In order to assimilate everything, we'd like to find out what Hawaiian Electric is going to have to go through to be able to handle all of these power sources and these different power sources in order to supply the energy needs of the state and of the island. Can you tell us what Hawaiian Electric will be going through? Will it need restructuring? Will it need new departments?
Essentially what we're going through, particularly here in Hawaii, is we're going from a place where there were a few large power plants, ours and others, that we collected energy from and then distributed throughout the system. The future will hold a lot more distributed generation, rooftop photovoltaics, or much smaller power plants or power generators spread out across the system. So it'll be our responsibility to collect all of that. There'll still be some big power plants. They may be wind plants as opposed to fossil fuel plants, or they may be biofuel plants instead of the current fossil fuel plants, but collect all of that energy together and then distribute it out across the system. So in some ways it'll be a far more sophisticated task than the one there is today. I think people have thought, well, we'll leave the generation business. That's probably not true, at least in the foreseeable future, because the heaviest sources of wind in Hawaii, of energy in Hawaii, are wind and solar. And those are fluctuating resources that need to be backed up. And at this point, we will probably be a significant part of that backup. As we find resources like geothermal, biomass, biofuels, and many of the forms of ocean energy, those are firm. Those behave very much like a conventional power plant. And as those come online, then there'll be less and less need for some of the current sources of backup power. As far as changes to the company, I think the major change is one we already made, which is we took the control room, the system operations area, and we took it out and made it a separate department, a separate area of the company. Because the future, as I said, is to have that area take in power from a much wider variety than the traditional and distribute it out. So it really becomes an important standalone function.
Well, what about the users of power? What are they going to expect, or is there something they need to plan for? Do they need any kind of backup systems, or will it be just a seamless transition?
I think it'll be relatively seamless. I mean, more and more people are putting power on their property, photovoltaics being the big example, though there is some increase in distributed wind, very small wind power, kinds of equipment that can be on an individual home or business. And it may be, as technology evolves, and you're right, we expect it to keep evolving quickly, it may be there are other small kinds of power plants you could have on your roof. So if you produce power on site, you can either put a battery there and give yourself storage of it, or use as much as you can and rely on the larger system to be your storage, if you will. But other than that, the average customer who doesn't put a small power plant on their own should really not see a difference. I mean, that's our goal, is that it would be seamless. It would just go from oil to all the kinds of local renewable energy we have.
I see. So then in that case, a large building, for example, would they benefit from having their own storage unit as opposed to, say, a single-family home that may not use as much power? Would that be something that they could get into?
I mean, not to avoid the question, but it's actually a math question. Storage right now is relatively expensive. So if you add that into the equation for a lot of businesses, it doesn't make sense. It's cheaper to essentially have the system be your storage, but some want it anyway for their own reasons. And we would expect prices of everything to come down over time, including the prices of on-site storage. So there's probably a point at which it would make sense. But right now it's your choice. You kind of do the math and decide for your business, is it the right thing to have on-site storage? For some it probably is. For others, it's probably better to rely on the system overall to provide your backup.
I see. In terms of the system then, all of these different sources that generate power, do they give the same type of power to Hawaiian Electric? In other words, do they produce the same kind of electricity that goes to the grid, or will there have to be some kind of modifications to handle any fluctuations or any variation in what Hawaiian Electric has to provide the ratepayers?
In one sense, it's all the same. An electron's an electron.
Right.
And so when it comes from the power generator, a wind farm or a power plant, and gets into the system, it's all the same. And those electrons move around the system and provide power. And, frankly, we can't tell what's a black electron and what's a green electron once it's in the system. The biggest difference is probably, the degree to which we can count on a steady flow. So from a conventional power plant or from sources like biomass or geothermal, which perform like the traditional kinds of units, it's a very steady flow of power. And we're unlikely to see significant fluctuations in it. With wind and sun, wind doesn't blow, wind blows, inconsistently. Sun, obviously not on at night, and even during the day we have clouds, or, last couple of days we had lots of rain. Then those units simply don't produce the same amount of electrons, or the amount they do fluctuates. We have to back that up, or they have to back it up on site. But once it's in the system, it's all the same, and we just move it around from wherever the producers of it are into everybody's homes and businesses.
All right. And in terms of the rates, what can businesses expect of the rates? Small businesses, for example, they need to know what they're up against in terms of costs and future costs so that they can plan accordingly. Larger businesses, maybe they could handle it, but even then, a businessman has to know future costs to survive.
And really, that's been, among all the other problems with oil, one of the biggest problems with oil, is its prices fluctuate based on events around the world over which we have no control. So you could have been planning at the beginning of 2011 for your utility bill based on what happened in 2010. And then the prices just skyrocketed during 2000. Nobody could plan for that. I mean, if you had had a budget, it would not have been in your wildest imagination that oil would increase the level it increased during the year. The great thing about local renewable energy is it's all either free, the source of the power, wind, sun, ocean, those are free. So what you're paying for is the cost of the piece of equipment that takes the energy out of the air or out of the sky and converts it to electricity. That's a capital cost. That you can predict. It's a fairly steady cost. Or the other energy like geothermal or biomass waste to energy has a fixed cost, a royalty or whatever. And again, you combine that with the capital cost of getting the power to you, it will be predictable. So we think it'll be cheaper. A lot of it already is cheaper. But on top of which, as we switch to local renewable energy, then you will be able to predict your prices. So I think the question is, the faster we get away from oil, the more predictable and we believe cheaper we can make your bill.